Hey everyone, Mike here with Moto Mecha. Thanks for tuning in. This time around, we're going to go over how to replace your rear brake pads and service your brake caliper. There's a few things that get neglected on these, and I picked up a bike that's about 15 years old and has probably never been done. So we're going to see what's in here. We got a pin here and a pin here, and your brake piston right there. Lots of corrosion, so we're going to get it all torn apart, cleaned up, put back together. All right, first step is we're going to crack loose this 5mm brake pad pin. Get that loose, pull that pin out, and then remove these two bolts. You can see how dry that is. Dirty. Not good. So your rear brake on most any bike is a floating caliper system. So it rides on these brake pins back and forth to center the caliper as the brake pads wear and tear. So it keeps everything nice and centered, which results in good braking power. If these pins were dirty or rusted or corroded or seized up and not allowing this brake caliper to move, it could drastically affect how the rear brake works. So it's very important that you service all these every once in a while so that you keep your caliper floating nice and smooth. So now I'm free to lift this caliper off the rotor. Pull the pin out. See how rusted that is? Pads are in the caliper bracket, and you can see how dirty this is. So I want to actually clean around this piston right here, clean all the brake dust out. I'm going to pull this pin out, clean it, re-grease it. I'm also going to clean inside of this hole. There's a lot of dirt in there. I'm going to make sure I get that all cleaned out. This dust cover, I'm going to clean that, reinstall it. And then I'm going to pull the pads out, replace them if necessary. These are still good, so I'll put them back in. Clean out the caliper as best as you can. I like to spray brake clean in the hole here. Use my wire brush. I like to use Q-tips to get in there. And you can see how dirty it is in there. So I got that all cleaned out. That's where this pin rides in there. So I gotta clean that. Next step would be to pull this apart, clean all that. So I'll pull this apart. It's really sticky. It doesn't want to move easy. So that compromises our brake performance. So I'm going to pull this pin all the way out. We're going to clean that. We're going to pull this out gently. We're going to clean that out, clean here, grease everything, put it all back together. And I'm going to show you how to clean this brake piston right here. Very important. Make sure you remember which way it went. If you need to, take pictures with your phone as you go along to have a reference. A lot of times, some of these clips aren't always perfectly obvious how they go back together. So I'll clean these with some brake clean and a brass wire brush. Usually gets them pretty darn clean. All right, you can see how nice and clean these came out. That's what you want. You want everything to be clean. Clean is key. So next we're going to clean the caliper. We're going to clean the piston, and I'll show you how to do that. You just want to make sure you get all that brake dust off. So for this, we're going to use one of my favorite tools, an old toothbrush. Spray some brake clean. Get everything sprayed down. So to get this piston cleaned really well, I pump the rear brake and I push that piston out just a little bit. You don't want to pump it all the way out because it'll just fall out. And you can see all that dirt and brake dust that's getting jammed between the piston and the seals, which will eventually cause it to leak. So we want to clean all this out and then push that piston back in. So to get to the back side of the piston, it's really hard to get there. So I'm going to show you how to rotate this piston. So I got a piston pin puller tool. So I'll grab the piston right there, and then I'll rotate the piston 180. Now I can get to the back side. I had a real stubborn spot here, so I had to use a brass wire brush. Just want to make sure I don't disturb this piston surface. Make sure you're not scratching it up. You want to look for any rust, any pitting, anything that can compromise the sealing between this piston and the seal inside that's holding the brake fluid. So there we go. Look at that piston. Super clean, right? Ready to go back together. Next step, we're going to push that piston back in. And for that, I got a brake piston tool. This allows me to push that piston back in. And it pushes the piston back in nice and square so it doesn't cock it off to one side or the other and jam up. So it's going to go in nice and linear and perpendicular, nice and easy. Nice and easy. During this step, I want to make sure your brake fluid reservoir is not going to overfill. So sometimes I open up the reservoir cap and I keep an eye on the fluid. So I'm going to push that piston all the way back in, and then we'll pump the rear brake after it's all assembled to get that piston back out to where the pad's made up with the rotor. Okay, now we're going to reinstall those clips. This clip went right here. This clip back over here. All right, we're gonna put some new brake pads in. So the pads look like they follow the contour of the rotor. So there's a clear left and right. Okay, next we're going to reinstall this piece. This is where one of the pins rides. Okay, that's going to go right here. We're going to throw some grease inside of there. We're going to put that pin back in. We're going to grease it first. We're going to slide that pin back in. There's a little groove that the end of the dust cover rides in to provide a seal so no moisture gets in there. Slide that all the way through. There we go. One down, one to go. That one slid right back into place. Wipe off any grease. And we check the movement. Nice and smooth. Not binding up, not dragging. Next we're going to grease inside of here. Reinstall this dust boot. That kind of sits on that little ridge right there. This side will click into the back side here. So we'll slide this over the brake pads. I'm going to install this bolt here first. Start it by hand. I'm going to grease this part of this bolt because that's what rides inside of there. Slide that in. Start it by hand. Install your brake pad pin. Next we're going to tighten all these three by hand. Okay, so now we're going to pump the rear brake. Watch that piston move out. And the whole thing sits back in its happy spot. We're going to double check this boot right here, make sure it's seated in the right spot. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. Pins in place. Pads are in the right spot. They're going to move a little. The whole caliper moves just a little. That's normal. Pump the rear brake a few times. And then also, if it's due for it, go ahead and bleed your rear brake system as well. I hope you enjoyed that rear brake caliper servicing, something that bike owners or mechanics rarely ever do. This is on a 2007 GSXR 750. It's about 15 years old, and I don't suspect it's ever been done. So now we know that rear brake is up to date, serviced, ready to ride. Thanks for watching.